Hi, my name is Paige. Welcome to my channel. I never make wrap-ups anymore. I tried to my very first year on BookTube, and I just found that I have a really hard time explaining any of the books that I've ever read. I stumble over every single word. I feel like every time I try and explain a book and how I felt about it and what happened in it without giving any spoilers away, I have to film 20 minutes worth of me rambling to get 2 good minutes of me speaking. So I avoid it. I don't do it. I don't like it. But I need to talk about the books that I read. What is the point of having a BookTube channel if I don't even talk about how I feel about the books? So I decided I'm gonna sit down and I'm going to share every single book that I have read since January. So I guess if you would like to see what I have read since January and see how I attempt to not fumble over every word, stick around and watch this video. I'd really appreciate it. The Love Hypothesis by Hazelwood, basically a Raylo fanfic. There's a weird boob eating scene that like haunts me to this day. I cannot get over it, but other than that, it was really cute. It was really fun. I had a great time reading it. I would recommend. Girl Made of Stars by Ashley Herring Blake. This is a harder to read book. It is about a girl whose twin brother rapes one of her friends, and it's just kind of like the aftermath of what happens during that, whether or not she chooses to believe her brother or her friend, and it's just really heartbreaking. I definitely enjoyed this one. I would recommend it, but again, check trigger warnings. It's a hard one to read. Hazel in the Deep Blue Sea is also by Ashley Herring Blake. It is a middle grade. It's about this young girl who has lost one of her mothers. Their other mother is moving them around, and it has some magical realism to it. It is heartbreaking. You get frustrated with her parents, but overall it's about her just kind of coming into her own after such a big, heavy loss in her life, and I really enjoyed it. I cried a lot through this one. I then read Theirs for the Night by Katie Robert. It is like a short novella. It was fine. I don't really remember much about it besides a girl goes into a club on her birthday, I believe, and she goes home with 2 guys, and it's them together for one night. It was fine. I think I would read more in the series if I owned them, but I don't, so do with that what you will. Next up is The Adventurers by Bryce Oakley. I enjoyed this one. It wasn't great. It's about 2 women who come together and decide to be brave and go on adventures after a couple of things go wrong in their lives. Doesn't really focus too much on the adventures. I wish it did, but I did really enjoy them as a couple, so I would recommend if you are interested in a sapphic romance with some adventurous themes. This is the last book I completed reading in January, and it's The Final Empire by Sanderson. I'm obsessed with the series. It is the first in the Mistborn trilogy where people can ingest metals and have magical powers basically, and they are attempting to overthrow their government, and it is very, very good. I highly recommend. I highly recommend though reading with the audiobook, because that helped me get through it a lot, because there's a lot of information packed into all these pages. I also attempted to read The Removed by Hobson, but I did DNF it after a couple of pages. I just really wasn't enjoying the writing style. From what I gathered, it's a family who has gone through a big loss, and it's just them, I think, picking up the pieces afterwards, but I just wasn't interested in this type of story at the time, so I did decide to DNF this one. Moving on to February, we started with American Queen by Sierra Simone, and I wish I would have DNF'd this one. It was not very good. It's like a male-male, female romance situation where the president and the vice president of the United States are basically in love with the same girl. They're also kind of in love with each other, and the president of the United States is a complete trash can. I absolutely hated him, and I wish I did not finish this book. It was not good. I don't recommend. I then read Restless Spirit by Brianna Michaels. This was like a hellhound reverse harem type of situation. Not very memorable as well. It was the first in the series, and I remember being really pissed off that basically nothing was wrapped up in book 1, and I'm not gonna read the rest in the series, so another kind of disappointment in February. Wow. But I did read a book that I loved, which was Conventionally Yours by Annabeth Albert. This is about 2 boys who are going on a road trip, who are playing this card game that they are absolutely obsessed with, and they go to a convention for this card game because they both want to win it for different reasons, and they are enemies at the beginning, and they start to understand each other. One of the characters is autistic, and it's so much fun. I absolutely love this one. I do recommend this one. I then read A Touch of Darkness by Scarlett St. Clair. This is a Hades and Persephone. I believe this one's set in like modern times, and I don't remember much about it. I do think I enjoyed it. I've heard that there's lots of typos in it. Did I notice any of them? No, I'm used to reading fan fiction, so I was able to gloss over those, but it was fine. I don't remember disliking it. I do remember not wanting to pick up any of the rest in the series because I got what I wanted from it, and that was that. Then I read That Can Be Arranged by Huda Fahmy, and this was a graphic novel that was so cute. I highly recommend it. It's super easy to read, and it's just about her and trying to find the person that she wants to marry in her life, and I really enjoyed this one, and the artwork is just so cute in it. Definitely check this one out if you like graphic novels. And finally, for February, we ended with Point Pleasant, which was my Story Continue book club pick, and it's by Jen Archer Wood. It's based on supernatural fanfiction. It was originally posted online as supernatural fanfiction, and I didn't like this very much. I really enjoyed feeling all of the vibes of supernatural and getting to follow a case, and I loved how I could pick out who was what character in Supernatural, but the relationship was actually pretty terrible. They were just not good for each other, and I was more interested in what was going on with this town than I was in them actually getting together. But it did bring me back for my love for Supernatural, like I ever really gave it up. I just love everything that has to do with Dean and Cass fanfiction, so I kind of did love it, but I also hated it. So if you like Destiel fanfic, read this. If you don't even bother. Thought I'd move around for a slightly different angle for the next couple of months. That would be interesting. Let's continue. First up in March, I read Roommate by Serena Bowen, and I absolutely love this one. It's kind of a semi-enemies to lovers sort of situation, but it's about one man who has left his hometown but needs to move back for financial reasons and ends up needing to move in with another man because his parents will not let him move back in with them, and so it's them being roommates and them eventually having feelings for each other. I mean, it's a romance. Like, what else can I do to explain this one? I enjoyed it. I don't remember if there's anything wonky with this one, but I really enjoy Serena Bowen's writing and I would recommend this. The next one I read was Ache by Marley Valentine, and if I'm remembering right, this is a childhood friends to lovers sort of deal, and there is some cheating in it, so if that's something that you would not be interested in, I don't recommend it for you then. But I did really enjoy it. I am a sucker for childhood friends to lovers, and I think that's the one that I really did enjoy, and I went down like a rabbit hole of wanting to just read childhood friends to lovers because that's my favorite trope ever. But I do recommend this one. Just look out for that cheating situation, because I know a lot of people don't like that one, and I usually don't either, but for some reason I did overlook it in that book, so that's probably a me problem. Next up was It Takes Two to Tumble by Kat Sebastian, and this one is about a man who has to go and take care of 3 kids because their mother has recently died and their father is a naval captain. The naval captain moves back to town and isn't really a big fan of having to be a parent because he doesn't know how, because he's been away so long, and the two men form a relationship, and I remember really liking this one. It was cute. I love when there's kids involved and parents are connecting or reconnecting with their kids. It's just sweet. It's a sweet one. It's historical romance. It's pretty cliche for the genre, but it's fast and I enjoyed it, so I would recommend. Barbarian Alien was next. It's by Ruby Dixon, and Ice Planet Barbarians is basically just about a group of girls who were kidnapped from Earth, and then they were dropped on a random planet because their captors could not continue taking them on, and they have to learn how to survive. And there are these big blue alien men who basically just imprint on them and decide that they're gonna keep them for themselves. So it's an interesting read, but they are a lot of fun if you are interested in alien romance. Well, I could not tell you all the plot details, but I did end up liking this couple quite a lot because it's 2 very stubborn people stubbornly being together. Yeah, I'd recommend. When a Scot Ties a Knot by Tessa Dare. I did really enjoy this one. It's about a girl who like grew up not wanting to ever be in a relationship. So she wrote fake letters to a man, like a Scottish man in the military, and made up this whole backstory about how he was going to be the person that she married, and then she killed him off. And these letters did end up going to a man with the same name, and he comes back into her life basically wanting to marry her for reasons, and it's fun. Tessa Dare's books are just so fun. I really do enjoy her writing. Barbarian Lover was next, also by Ruby Dixon. Couldn't tell you what happened in this book. I do think I really liked this couple as well. I think this was my favorite, but I don't remember anything about it. But I do need to pick up the rest in the series because I just need to know what happens. And I heard there's cute little alien babies, and I love babies in books. I know that's like not a popular opinion, but I just love little cute little babies in books. So I'm gonna continue on. Do I know what this is about? No, but it's fun. So if you want to read fun alien porn, read these. Yesterday is History by Kosoko Jackson. Basically a time-traveling liver. It was fine. I don't remember loving it. It had some touching, heartbreaking moments, a lot of questions that I don't think were ever answered, but it was cute. It was cute enough for what it was. yeah, that's all I have to say. Then I read The Well of Ascension by Sanderson, and it's boring at times, but it's also really good. I was connected to all these characters by then, so like they literally could brush their teeth and I would be super excited to be reading them just because I love them and I love this series. So it's a boring, slow moving second book, but it's worth it in the end, as most second books are. Next up for the book club, we read Song of Achilles by Madeline Miller, and I loved all the quotes in this. You can't see a single highlight that I have, but there are a lot of highlights in this one. So I basically just love this for the quotes, not so much the storyline. I didn't feel like the love story was very strong, and that's what I expected to get out of it, but these quotes are living in my brain. He's half my soul, as the poets say. Like, oh, stop. Quotable, not much else. It's okay, it's good. It's sad. I did cry. I always cry though. Quotable, makes you cry. Nothing else. I wish I loved this more. I wish I did. I then started and immediately DNF'd Want Me by Neve Wilder. I just did not enjoy the dialogue whatsoever. I didn't like how they spoke to each other, so DNF'd it from the start. Didn't want to push through something like that. Last up in March, I read Educated. It's a memoir by Tara Westover, and I think the best way I could describe this is it's about a girl or a woman who is raised in a doomsday cult, I believe, or like her father really believes that the government is out to get them and that the end of the world is coming, and so she has a very sheltered and enclosed life and is not allowed to be educated, and then it's her journey through getting out of her family's abuse and racism and all of that situation that she is in and finally getting educated in her life. I really enjoyed listening to it. I would definitely listen to the audiobook. There is a warning of using the N-word. It's, I believe, like her brother or her father in one point calling another person that, so that is something to look out for in this, and I don't know what else to say about it. I found it in a little free library and decided to give it a go, and it wasn't a bad reading experience. But that does wrap up March. Let's move on to April. I started off April with The Highwayman by Kerrigan Byrne, and looking back I probably should have DNF'd this one because the main male character ended up just being like a garbage can. He was so mean to her, and for no good reason, especially when we get some reveals towards the end. It just really doesn't make sense why he is so trash garbage. So could have done without. Didn't do much for me. Do I remember what it's about? Kinda. The girl gets married to a boy in their own like little tiny private ceremony amongst themselves. He ends up dying. When she's older, living the life of a widower, ex-husband or dead husband's friend comes back and decides to marry her, but he is like a highwayman and basically very wanted, and yeah, that's all I can really remember. He was just trash, and I think she was sweet. I liked her. Moving on. For my book club in April, we read Gallant by V.E. Schwab. I do remember enjoying this one more for the atmosphere than for the plot. This is about a girl who I believe is an orphan, and she one day finds out that she has a family that is living and goes to this house, and they are not quite as welcoming as she hoped they would be. And in this big manor outside, there is a gate that has some secrets going on, and it's spooky. There are ghosts, and that's about all that I remember. I do remember really enjoying the atmosphere and the writing. There was just some things at the end that I wish wouldn't have happened, but it was good. It was good. We had a fun time with the book club. So if you want to join us for future book clubs, look at my description for the link to our Discord. We would love to have you over there. Alright, and this complete asshole of a book decided to show up and make every single other book that I have read just not feel any good at all, because this was so good. This is The Hero of Ages by Sanderson, the third in the Mistborn trilogy, and I cannot handle how good this book was and how the reveal at the end just overwhelmed me to the point that I was sobbing for like an hour, because everything came together so beautifully in this book. And if you at all have the chance to read this series without looking up a single spoiler, with avoiding every single YouTube video out there made dedicated to this series, without looking up any fan art while you are reading, do it, because that is what I did, and I got the most from this experience. Genuinely, if you can avoid spoilers for this, it's just so good. It is so worth it to get to the end of this book. But I also am so mad at it because I read it so early on in the year and nothing will compare. Everything else I've read has just been lackluster, and it breaks my heart. So love hate with this, but mostly just love it. Mostly just love. Act Your Age, Eve Brown by Talia Hibbert was up next. This is the third in the Brown sister trilogy. It's about Eve, who basically her family tells her that she needs to grow up and finally figure out what she has to do with her life, and she stumbles upon this bed and breakfast that's owned by, I think his name's Jacob Wayne, and he doesn't want to hire her, but she's basically his only option, and it's them finding out that they're also in love with each other. You know, how else do you explain romances besides saying who the characters are and that they end up falling in love with each other? But Talia Hibbert's books are so much fun. They are really easy to read. I did honestly think that this one was a little bit more like with the spice. For whatever reason, it just like really stuck out to me, and I am not very prude when it comes to listening to spice in audiobooks or even reading it, but this one just, I didn't love it for whatever reason. But I did enjoy the book because the characters are so much fun, and I love all of the Brown sisters. They're great, so I'd recommend this one for sure. This is the last book I finished in April, and It Ends With Us by Colleen Hoover. No clue why everyone sells this as a romance. It is not a romance. It is like the opposite of a romance, but I did enjoy myself, especially at the end. There's like one paragraph on the very final page that just like really hit home. The author's note at the end also sobbed my way home as I was listening in the car to the audiobook. Yeah, just like sobbing uncontrollably. But this is about a girl named Lily, and it's told in like past and present. Lily in the past fell in love with a boy named Atlas, and it's her like looking back at her diary entries talking about her time with Atlas, but it's also her in her present relationship with a man named Ryle and all of the drama that happens in her and Ryle's relationship. So it definitely is hard-hitting. It's slightly of its time because her diary entries in this book are all written to Ellen, which just felt a little questionable. Maybe we could have just done like any other celebrity, but I enjoyed the message. Did I enjoy the book overall? Kinda, but the message I think is a good one. And my only DNF in April was The Woman in Cabin 10 by Ruth Ware. I just didn't like that typical like woman who is taking prescription pills and drinking a lot of alcohol in a situation where there's going to be a mystery. I just knew from the start I wasn't going to enjoy it, so I DNF'd it like pretty early on, and that was April. All right, another new angle. Is this interesting? Does it keep it interesting? Anyway, we started off May with Skyward, Starsight, and Cytonic by Brandon Sanderson. The first book in the series is Skyward, and it follows a girl named Spencer who her dream is to become a pilot. She lives on a planet called Detritus, and it is basically a cast-off human planet where they all got shipwrecked about 100 or so years ago, and all these humans that are living on this planet are basically trying to fight these alien life forms who keep attacking them. And Spencer wants to become a pilot so that she can go up and fight all of these aliens that they call the Krell, and there are a lot of blocks in her way because her father was part of this Starfleet or whatever they are called, and he ended up turning on his fellow pilots and was branded a coward. So she was also then branded a coward's daughter, and they don't trust her to become a pilot, but she kind of pushes through her way into becoming a pilot. And there's just a lot in this book. I absolutely adore book number 1. It was a reread, and I still felt all of the feelings that I felt in the first book. It is one of my favorite books ever. It is followed by Starsight, which is not one of my favorites. I do still enjoy it, but some of the characters that we met in book 1 are not as present in this second book, but it does progress the story, and all of the people that we meet in this one are very, very interesting, and I did enjoy it overall. It was just missing some of that feeling that came with Skyward for me personally. But then we get to book 3, which I really disliked. Again, the characters that we know and love from book 1 are just not quite as prevalent in this one, and we're meeting even more characters in this one. Sorry, that was my computer. But we meet even more characters in this that I just didn't care for. By this third book, I just wanted to be back with a lot of the characters we met in book 1, but it was still okay. I got through it, but I honestly don't think it was very memorable. I am holding out hope that book 4 is going to wrap everything up and make this book make a lot more sense. But honestly, for this series, I would recommend reading book 1, and then if everyone tells you that book 4 is like amazing and wraps everything up in a nice neat little bow, then maybe read, I already forgot the name of it. It starts with an S. What are you? Starsight and then Cytonic. But other than that, yeah, I would just recommend book 1 and then holding off and waiting until we know if book 4 is going to be any good. Next up in my journey to trying to complete series that I have on my shelves, I reread Strange the Dreamer by Laini Taylor. And I know this is such an unpopular opinion, but I did not like this again for the second time. It was like a little bit torturous to read this for a second time. The story overall is fine. It's about a man named Laszlo who is obsessed with this city called Weep that is like a forgotten city. The entire kingdom that he lives in has forgotten the name of it, and he eventually gets the chance to go and discover this city of Weep, and it's just not my cup of tea. I did not enjoy the writing style the first time I read it, and I really didn't like it the second time I read it. It's just a very boring story with a lot of details. But I had book 2, Muse of Nightmares, on my shelf for the longest time, and everyone kept saying, read book 2, read book 2. It's so good, you have to read book 2. And I read book 2, and I wish that I just stopped at book 1, because it's that same like lyrical, descriptive, beautiful writing. It is beautiful, I will admit, but I do not care about the details of every wall and every person's hair color and every detail of the street, and I just don't care. So I did not enjoy myself. I did not like any of the characters in these books. I thought that they were very childish, and some of the characters are just downright evil and horrible, and nothing really happens. Nothing really happens. So I didn't enjoy it, and I will probably unhaul these one day. I can admit that the writing style is gorgeous. It's just not for me. I really like a clean cut, straightforward, they go from A to B and that's it. I don't need very many descriptions. I then read The World Gives Way by Marissa Levian, and this was a big surprise for me. I absolutely loved it. The way I'm describing it in my own brain is Space Titanic plus the 100, you know? Really, really enjoyed this one. It's very bleak and it's slow moving, but I really connected to it. It's, like I said, like Space Titanic. They are in this moving spaceship hurtling through space, and there is a crack in the ship. And it's very character based, and I just really enjoyed it. I am still thinking about it to this day. This was just like one of those, you think you're just not gonna like it and it's gonna sit on your shelf type of books, and then it surprises you because you connect to it so much. So I'm glad I picked this one up. I don't think it'll be for everybody, but you know, Space Titanic, how could you not enjoy that? I then listened to The Emperor's Soul by Brandon Sanderson. It is a really short novella about a woman who has the ability to create these things called soul stamps, and as a way for her to get out of her imprisonment that she's in, she has to create a soul stamp for the emperor of her kingdom, and it's just kind of following her 100-day journey and having to do this, and I enjoyed it. It was a nice, quick, easy read. I wish that it was a little bit more in-depth and that we got to see more of her time in it. There were a lot of time jumps, obviously, because it's a novella. We can't get every single day that she's in this prison trying to create this stamp, but I wish we could have just gotten a few more. But it was a good one. I did enjoy myself reading that. Next up was The Invisible Life of Addie LaRue by V.E. Schwab. What can I say about this one? It was fine. It was fine. I enjoyed the audiobook. I had a good time. I did not love any of the characters. I thought it would do more than it did, but for what it was, I had an okay time. I've read quite a lot of reviews on this one and how people feel about it, and I agree with a lot of those points, and I think that's all I can say about it. It was good. It's about a woman who decides to sell her soul to the devil so that she does not have to marry a man that she doesn't want to marry, basically. And it is her facing the consequences of that decision, because going forward, no one can remember her name or remember that she exists after meeting her. They meet her, they get to know her. The second they walk away from her, they forget who she is. So it's an interesting premise that didn't really go anywhere for me, and I wish it would have ended in a very different way, but it was good enough. I had a good time listening to the audiobook, and I think that's all I can say about it. Then for the book club, we read Daisy Jones and the Six by Taylor Jenkins Reid. This was my second time reading this. I listened to the audiobook while I was at work, and again, love this one. I just really enjoyed Taylor Jenkins Reid's writing style. I know she wrote this very differently than she wrote Seven Husbands of Evelyn Hugo and even Malibu Rising, but it's just very readable. And I just feel like these characters are so real. They make mistakes like we all do. They do stupid things like we all do. And I felt way more connected to the book the second time around than I did the first time around. It's still not as great to me as Seven Husbands, but still really good. I am in love with Camilla Dunn. She is my favorite ever. I will definitely be listening to this one all the time. The vibes in this one are just too good to not reread. I then read Two Rogues Make a Right by Cat Sebastian. I believe between the first book, It Takes Two to Tumble, and this one, there is one more book in between. I just didn't really care for those characters in the first book, so I decided to pick up this one, mainly because it's a childhood friends to lovers story, and that is my weakness. It is my weakness. I cannot get enough of that trope. But this one had it. It also has one of the men in this who is chronically ill, so that adds another touch of angst to it, and I just really enjoyed it. I definitely teared up at work at some point just because I connected to these characters immediately. I really enjoyed them together. They are a little bit dramatic, but hey, it's a romance. Everybody's dramatic in a romance. But essentially this is about a man named Will who has found his best friend Martin completely ill, and he basically kidnaps him and takes him to the countryside and brings him back to health. And it's about them being in this countryside cabin together, and they're just so cute. They're just very cute together. I don't know what else to say that wouldn't give any spoilers away. Two childhood best friends in a countryside cabin. It's good. It's good. It's good. Next up, I read Maybe You Should Talk to Someone by, what is her name? Lauren Gottlieb? I'm not sure how to pronounce that last name, but this was kind of what started my like nonfiction and self-help journey that I go on later in the month. But this is basically a therapist's memoir, or just like a recounting of her life when she has recently been broken up with and doesn't handle it very well, so she decides to seek a therapist for herself. And it's also stories of people that she has worked with, and I sobbed towards the end of this book. It was just really touching, the stories and hearing the different ways that therapy helped this therapist, and how she as a therapist has helped others, and what she has learned from these people that she's helped, and what she's learned from her own therapist. And it was just really well written. I really enjoyed it, and it does encourage me to want to try therapy. It's one of my goals this year. I still haven't done it yet because it's expensive, and I have a million excuses like a lot of us do who have not yet sought therapy, but it did really encourage me to try and find options for that so far. But I really enjoyed it. It's very moving at some points, and yeah, it definitely, like I said, kick-started my need to read some nonfiction this year. My leg is falling asleep. I've been sitting crisscross for too long. I then read The Infinite Noise by Lauren Shippen, and this book is so forgettable that I genuinely could not tell you what happened. Oh yeah, there's a character who, he kind of has a superpower where he can feel others' emotions, and it's him trying to deal with this in therapy. And there is another character who he becomes friends with, who is also struggling with depression and anxiety, I believe. And that is all that I remember about it. I honestly did not enjoy this. I listened along to the audiobook, and I felt like it didn't really have much of a plot. We were just with some characters in therapy, and they didn't do much with the superpowers, so I would not recommend this one. The last book I finished in the month is Warbreaker by Brandon Sanderson, and this is about two sisters basically. One who was raised to go and be married off to a god king, and one who has just been super rebellious and doesn't really want to follow her family's rules. The youngest sister is then sent in the older sister's place to go marry the god king, and the older sister decides that she needs to go and rescue her younger sister. And it's both of their journeys on one dealing with living and being married to a man that she was not prepared for, and the other is the older sister's journey in realizing the world is not what she thought it was. And I really enjoyed it. It had a lot of interesting characters. There's twists and turns that I personally didn't see coming, and I just really enjoyed seeing the older sister and how far down she was brought, and watching her journey all the way to the end. That was super intriguing to me. The entire time I was just intrigued by these characters and the entire journey that they go on, and their downfalls and everything. So I did enjoy this one, not as much as the Mistborn trilogy, but it still was really good. The one book I did DNF is American Prince by Sierra Simone. I just hated these characters so much in the first book, and I bought this for no reason, and I still hated them. So I just DNF'd it, and I will not continue on. All right, let's move on to the next month. I started June with Chance of a Lifetime by Jude Devereaux, and this is another one I kind of wish I DNF'd. It's about, how do I explain this? A man and a woman who met in like 1800 Ireland, 1844 Ireland, and fell in love, and they were not supposed to fall in love. So because of this, the angels send the man back into present time where this woman has been reincarnated, and basically tell him that he has to set her up with her true soulmate. And nothing like that really happens in this book. They do get reunited, and he starts to reunite her with her soulmate, but it's mostly focused on like a mystery in this because it's a series, and I didn't know it was a series. Nothing about this book tells you that it is book 1 of a series. So the plot that is promised on the back is a plot that does not happen. It is not resolved in this book, and that really bothered me. So if I knew that this was a series, I would not have read it. I didn't like the characters enough to push all the way through. I was really questioning at that 30-minute left mark what the heck was going to happen to wrap everything up, but nothing was wrapped up. I don't recommend this one. It was garbage. I then read From Blood and Ash, A Kingdom of Flesh and Fire, and A Crown of Gilded Bones, all by Jennifer L. Armentrout. And I won't continue on with the series, but I didn't have a terrible time while I was reading. So book 1 follows Poppy, who is a maiden, and she is supposed to remain pure and virtuous because she is going to ascend. I don't know what that means though, and in her ascension she's gonna like save a bunch of people in the kingdom, and she's like their hope for the kingdom. So there's that, and she has a bodyguard that gets killed at the beginning, so a new bodyguard has to step up in that place, and the bodyguard's name is Hawk, and Poppy is immediately attracted to him because at the very beginning she kissed him and she felt a connection, and then Hawk is just protective of her, and things go on from there. Book 1 was my favorite. Reveals at the end made it very interesting. I had a good time. Book 2 and 3, not sure what really happened in them. They're very long for no reason. There is a lot of spice in these for no reason, in very uncomfortable places at very questionable times. I just ended up not really enjoying the characters. There's only one character that I like. His name is Kieran. He is basically the know-all character because Poppy asks him literally 400 questions every second, but Kieran knows everything, so you learn everything through him. So he's kind of the most interesting just because he knows everything somehow. He's like an entire encyclopedia for this series. But I'm probably not going to continue on to the next books because there are just so many words and not a lot of plot. Like I don't know what's going on in these. So I purchased them, I read them, we're moving on. After reading all 3 of those books, I needed a break. I could not do fantasy, I could not listen to anything that was super long, so I did buy Atomic Habits by James Clear, and I really enjoyed myself. This is a typical self-help. It tells you what you need to do to get your life in order and not stay in the same situation that you are, and it just really helped me kind of like visualize the things that I've been doing in my life that have not made me as successful as I would like to be, and it's helped me make a few changes here and there that make me feel like I'm on the trajectory towards who I want to be. So it was a nice little like palette cleanser from all of the fantasy and everything that I have been reading in the past few months, and I enjoyed it. If you are looking towards changing your habits, I feel like this is a nice easy one to read to get some helpful tips, but you could also look up any video on YouTube on Atomic Habits and everyone will tell you everything that you need to know with those. So then I read Texas Ridge by Fern Michaels, and oh my dear god, this book felt like it took me 12 years to read. It was so long for what? For what? And there's 3 more books in the series. For why? Basically, this is following a young girl who is 17 at the beginning. Her name is Billy, and she is raised by like a very overbearing mother who just wants her to marry rich and like marry well and get them out of the situation that they're in. And Billy is very obedient, does what she needs, but one day she meets a man named Moss, and he is in the military, and he's like 25 years old, and he is drawn to her, and he's absolute trash. He's awful human. And basically Billy's mom finds out that Moss is wealthy and sets Billy up to get pregnant with Moss's child so that she can then marry him and that they can be set for life. And basically that is what happens. Billy gets set up to sleep with Moss, ends up pregnant with this child, gets married, and they move to Texas to this huge plot of land where Moss's family lives because they are wealthy, wealthy, wealthy. And then we follow them for like 40 years as they are rich, terrible people being terrible to each other. And I had a horrible time, but I also kind of loved it. I don't know how to explain this. You're just with these characters for so long that by the end, like, you just wanted to know what happened, and there like are maybe 3 redeeming characters at the end of this, and there are some things that happen to some terrible characters that like they got what was coming for them, so that was like really satisfying. There are 3 more books in this series, and I'm going to read them because my grandma, one day we put all of her favorite books on a shelf, and they are on her favorite bookshelf and I don't know why, but I'm gonna read them because I want my initial to be next to my grandma's name in all of these books. So I will persevere through the rest of this series eventually. But man, was it rough. And I did not have a good time. These characters are garbage. After that book, I definitely needed another palette cleanser, so I found The Magic of Manifesting by Ryu Shinohara. Okay, here's a story with this one though. I found it on Audible, didn't want to pay for it, so I found it on Scribd. Or so I thought, but no, whoever put it on Scribd had basically photoshopped the author's name off of it, put a random name, and then uploaded some random audio that I listened to like an hour of, and I just sat there thinking, wow, this is so bad. This is such bad advice. I really don't enjoy this. So I finally cross-referenced to Audible and found out that the book was totally different. The hours were different, the narrator was a real narrator where the Scribd one was like a robot. So yeah, it was just an interesting situation, and because I read the weird robot version on Scribd and then read the Audible version, I kind of lost a lot of the information, but it kind of eased me into learning about manifesting because I've been hearing about it so much. So I decided to learn about manifesting because I've heard people talk about it. I see it on Instagram, I see it on YouTube, people talking about manifestation journals. So I wanted to learn about it, and this is not the only book that is about manifesting that I have listened to in the past month. But this was the first one. Do I remember anything about it? No, but it taught me some things. Like I said, I was on a nonfiction self-help kind of kick for a little bit there, so I read Unfuck Yourself by Gary John Bishop. I could have done without this one. It was just very much an angry white man telling you that every choice that you're making is your own fault. I just felt like I was being yelled at for a couple of hours, and that just wasn't a great feeling. Moving on, I then read Sisters-in-Law by Linda R. Hirschman. So this one is about Ruth Bader Ginsburg and Sandra Day O'Connor, and it's like talking about their differing political views, but still how they had like the same overall vision for women's rights. And it just goes into a lot of the cases that they won and what that did for women's rights, and it wasn't as powerful as I expected it to be based on what my cousin had said about it, but I did feel like I learned a lot of information about laws and stuff that I hadn't known prior to reading this book. And then with everything that's going on with our Supreme Court, I just felt like it was a good time to be informed from this book. So it wasn't very riveting, it wasn't very moving, it was just very fact-based on this is what they believed in and this is what they did and this is the law that they changed or this is what they fought for, and I felt like I learned a lot, and I'm glad that I read it when I did. Next up was Anxious People by Frederick Bachman, and this is basically about like the aftermath of a bank robbery gone wrong, and you're meeting all of the characters that were involved in this bank robbery, and you're trying to figure out who did it, why they did it, and what happened to them. And I did enjoy this quite a bit. I liked it way more than I liked Beartown. Beartown's really not one to enjoy based on the premise of it, but I liked the writing style in this more than I liked Beartown's. This was quirky and goofy at certain times and heartfelt and moving at others, and it's really just about like being a grown-up in this world and how kind of crappy it can be, and I just enjoyed that part of it. The overall plot line, it was fine to me. It wasn't what I took away from it, mostly just the message of how difficult it can be to be an adult and how the people that you surround yourself with can help make it less crappy. So I did enjoy it. Not a new favorite like it seemed to be everyone else's, but I did like it. Another manifesting book I read was The Total Law of Attraction by David Chi. Again, don't really remember what it was about, I was just having an off day with DNFing a bunch of books, which I'll talk about in the end, and I just needed something light and easy, and I'm still very intrigued on learning about the law of attraction and manifestation, so I listened to that one, and it basically just gave a few more details that I didn't learn from the magic of manifesting. So again, I don't remember much, but it was fine. It was a nice little palate cleanser again in the month, because I was reading so many books. Next up was That Summer by Jennifer Weiner. This is about a woman who is getting emails from another woman who shares her name, and she reaches out to that woman and they become friends, but you find out that the woman who was sending her emails was doing it for a reason, and it's figuring out what that reason was and what happened there, and it was okay. I stand by what I said on my Goodreads review, that it's like a contemporary that couldn't commit to being a thriller. I wouldn't recommend this one. Then I read Girl, Woman, Other by Bernadine Evaristo, and this one was pretty good. It has a lot of characters, which confused me for a while. It's about mothers and daughters, and you're getting a bunch of different point of views and different backgrounds and different stories, and it's kind of how they all connect, and it was good. I feel like I would have gained more had I read along to it physically than just listen to the audiobook, so I do think I'll go back and reread this someday in the future. But there are some characters that I really enjoyed, some characters that I really hated. They did terrible things, and some touching parts, some funny parts. It just kind of had it all, but I do recommend reading along to this one because there's so many characters to keep track of, and I definitely got confused at points. For my book club, we read The Extraordinaries by TJ Klune. This is my third time reading this book. It is just so fun. It's about a boy named Nick who is obsessed with real life superheroes that are called the Extraordinaries. He writes self-insert fan fiction about them, and one day he ends up getting entangled in all of their mess, and it's just so much fun. I love TJ Klune's writing, as we know, and I love this book as much on the third reread as I did on the first, so I highly recommend this series. Nick is just so cute. I absolutely love him. The audiobook, so much fun. This was the first time I listened to the audiobook, and I wish I would have from the beginning. It's so much fun. So get the audiobook too if you want to read this one. Again, with the manifestation, I read The Last Law of Attraction book you'll ever need, and I did really enjoy this one. I liked it better than the other two that I've read on the law of attraction and manifesting. I felt like this one made so much more sense, and it definitely gave you a very much how to start manifesting for yourself. So if you are interested in the topic, I would pick this one up over all of the other ones. Last up, in June, I read The Obelisk Gate and The Stone Sky by N.K. Jemisin, and I'm not going to say much about them because in a couple of weeks I do have a reading vlog where I did read both of these, but I did really enjoy book 2. I kind of felt that book 3 fell flat. The Broken Earth trilogy is what it's called. It starts with the 5th season, and basically in the 5th season we are following a couple of different point of views in a world where basically the apocalypse is happening every couple hundred years or so, and they call them seasons, and there are these people who have magical powers to basically connect to the earth and the tectonic plates, and they can stop earthquakes and they can make a lot of different earth-based things happen. I don't know how to explain their powers, but it's called orogeny, and people with orogeny are very looked down upon, but some are protected by these guardians and taken and taught how to become much more powerful erogenist, and it's really good. The writing style in book 1 continues on into book 2 and 3, but in book 1 it's just so much more impactful, and there's a lot of twists and turns that I didn't expect, and book 1 was just a friggin' masterpiece. I absolutely loved it. Book 2, still pretty good, answered a few more questions, but by book 3 I just felt like I was still learning the world building and I was struggling through it, and the ending just didn't do what I expected it to do, but I still really like this writing style. I'm really eager to read more by N.K. Jemisin after these books because they were just so intriguing. I really enjoyed these writing styles. But yeah, book 1, masterpiece. Absolutely recommend that one. And then on book 2 or 3, like, you could read them, but they're not my favorite. And then we just have my DNFs from June. I DNF'd 3 books. I DNF'd The Light We Cannot See by Anthony Doerr, mostly because I just wasn't interested in the writing style. I think I'm kind of over historical fiction right now, or like this set in World War II era historical fiction that I used to love. Like, high school me would have eaten this up in like half of a day, but it felt like the writing style in Strange the Dreamer, just too beautiful, and I didn't know what was going on. So I decided I didn't want to push through it, and I DNF'd this one. This one I'm kind of disappointed that I DNF'd, but it's Lost in the Neverwood by Eden Thomas. I really didn't like the characters. I didn't like the character of Wendy. This is a Peter Pan retelling, and I just thought that Wendy was very rude and her parents were terrible parents. So I decided I didn't want to push through. I'm kind of over YA right now. I hope that I can get back into it because I do still have a lot of YA books that I am interested in reading, but I'm struggling with YA right now. So I really hoped that I could have liked this one, but it just didn't do it for me, and I just decided, why push through? And then in this exact same day, I had my third DNF, which was The Rest of Us Just Live Here by Patrick Ness, and I could not tell you what this book is about. I think that it's about a world where there are a bunch of people who are chosen ones and go on journeys and have wild things happen to them, and our main character is not a chosen one. He's just an average guy living in this world dealing with his regular problems, but for some reason I just could not care about these characters, and part of me thinks I was just having a really bad day and didn't want to read and shouldn't have read and should have done something else with my brain because I did DNF 3 books in one day. But part of me also thinks that I just don't connect to Patrick Ness's writing because I did read More Than This and I hated that one so much. So it might just be a writing style. It also could be that the main characters in this book were my co-workers' names and it felt so awkward because they are kind of unusual names. At least one of them is. So yeah, this was my third DNF in June. Since this video is already like 400 hours long, I figured might as well throw in some stats at the end just in case anyone wants to hear them. So star rating, my average star rating is 3.8 stars. I have had 6 5 stars, 32 4 stars, 13 3 stars, no 2 stars, no 1 stars. I have 6 that I have not rated and 7 books that I have DNF'd. I have read 8 books physically, 3 books through ebook, 33 pure audiobooks, and then 13 were a mix of audiobooks and reading it either physically or with an ebook. For my genres, I have read 15 fantasy, 4 sci-fi, 5 contemporary, 3 nonfiction, 1 horror, 5 historical fiction, 12 romance, 5 self-help, 1 graphic novel, and I did categorize some erotica, so 5 of those as well. For my age group, I've only read 1 middle grade, 10 young adult, 2 new adult, and 44 adult books. I also try and track if a book has some sort of representation in it, and I'm tracking a bunch of different types, but it's looking like 2/3 of my books so far do have some sort of representation in them. 41 of the authors I have read from identify as female, 15 identify as male, and I have not read any books yet that have a trans or non-binary author. 45 of the authors that I have read from are white, 5 are black, 1 is indigenous, and 1 is Middle Eastern, and 13 of the books that I have read I have categorized as being own voices books. So I definitely have a lot of room for growth in the types of representation that are in the books that I read and the authors that I am reading from, and I am trying to purchase more books that have diverse authors and genres and representation. So it is definitely always in the back of my mind the types of books that I do need to pick up because I can be doing better and I should be doing better. I'm hoping that when we see these stats, they look quite a bit better in certain areas than they do right now. So those are all the books that I have read or DNF'd so far this year. I really thought I could wrap this video up in 15 minutes and I'd be on my way, but that was not the case. Thank you so much if you have made it this far in the video. Leave a crown emoji in the comments so that I know that you have sat here and listened to me speak for this long. Also tell me what your least favorite book of the year was so far this year so that I can avoid it. If you are interested in chatting with me about books, I would love to talk to you about them, and you can find my Instagram in the description if you want to, as well as the Discord to the fanfiction readathon and Story Continue book club that I host with my friend Serena. We chat about fanfiction and books and whatever the heck else we want to talk about over in that Discord, so I would love it if you would join us. You do not have to be a part of the readathon or the book club to join that Discord. But that is all that I have for this video. Again, thank you so much for watching. I can't believe you're still here listening to me speak. Like, you are magical and I absolutely love you, and I will see you in my next video. All right, bye. That was like 2 hours of filming. Why did I do that?